My name is Jerry Gill. Today is September 8th, 2009. I'm visiting with Ed Miller on the Oklahoma State University campus in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is for the O State Storage Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Ed, I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking time from your schedule to come by and visit with us today.
Well, this is a real pleasure, really.
Well, why don't we sort of maybe start with the beginning?
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit, Ed, about where you grew up, a little bit about your early life, your family?
Okay. Well, I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and really first generation off of a farm. And my dad was a physician, and my mom was a bookkeeper, housewife, and had a brother and a sister. And like I say, grew up in town. Had a lot of relatives out on the farm, and some of my early reflections are being dropped off at the farm for summer when my parents might go on a vacation or something like that. I'd be dropped off at the farm. So I've got real good memories of Uncle Art and Aunt Genevieve and riding on the back of some of the workhorses and things like that back in Iowa. And ended up going to Iowa State University, which, of course, is another great land grant university. Got degrees in forestry and soil science. Got really interested in soil science. Had a great professor up there, Wayne Schultes. And then got my PhD in water resources hydrology, primarily through the ag engineering department up there. So stayed at one university. And by the time I graduated, I had a wife and small family, 3 kids, and we shipped off, and first job was with the university.
Yeah, as I recall, Ed, all 3 of your degrees, bachelor's, master's, PhD from Iowa State, correct?
Yes, I kept changing. I just kept changing departments and colleges, but all 3 degrees from one university.
Well, can you share a little bit about your career before you came to Oklahoma State?
Sure. Yeah, my first job, I don't know if you recall, but times were pretty tough in 1973 when I got my PhD. Not too dissimilar from these days when new college graduates, particularly with higher ed, are looking for positions in professor positions, had a tough time finding jobs. And I can remember I had 2 job offers. One was University of Alaska in Fairbanks, and the other one was Stephen F. Austin State University in East Texas with their forestry school. And I remember that particularly because the folks from the University of Alaska said everything they could to discourage me from taking their job. I said, you've got a wife and young kids, and Fairbanks is a tough place to live with a young family. At any rate, took the job in Texas and taught there for 2 years. And Weyerhaeuser Company then was looking for someone with, interestingly enough, soils background, forestry background, water and water quality background. And that was a ticket for me. I'd been a schoolboy most of my life. And so I thought, gee, what an opportunity to go to work for Weyerhaeuser Company in their research group out of Hot Springs, Arkansas. So I went to work for Weyerhaeuser Company as a soil scientist, forest hydrologist, and worked for them for about 11 years. And it was really an exciting job. Did a lot of work as the Water Quality Act. If you recall, water quality was a big issue back in the 70s, and lots of pressure on forest industry with respect to water quality. So I did a lot of work with Weyerhaeuser Company in research and really applications of forestry practices and the effects of forestry practices on water quality. And I had an opportunity to manage their southern soil survey as well. Weyerhaeuser was a very progressive company, and they had all of their forest lands were mapped. All the soils were mapped to help them with their prescriptions of forestry practices. So those were the 2 jobs primarily that I had with Weyerhaeuser Company, was heading up their soil survey and working on their forest practices out in the field to maintain high levels of water quality. Then I had an opportunity to come to Oklahoma State as a forest hydrologist, and there were 2 people here who really were of interest to me. One was Tom Hahn, and the other one was Bruce Wilson. Tom Hahn was in biosystems and ag engineering, and he was a member of the National Academy of Sciences, and really probably one of the top statisticians in hydrology in the country. And after 10 years, 12 years with Weyerhaeuser Company, I was needing some kind of retreading, some scientific retreading. So it was a great opportunity for me. I came over here to the university to do teaching and to do research in, of all things, forestry and water quality, and to work with Tom Hahn and Bruce Wilson in biosystems and ag engineering, and kind of get my math and my statistics back up to speed. And so that was exciting, and Weyerhaeuser continued to fund me to do their research across the South. So it was a great opportunity for me to have a faculty position, continue to enjoy the support of Weyerhaeuser Company for research, and then to work under Tom Hahn and with Bruce Wilson. But things changed then. I really ramped up a research program for 2 or 3 years, and then I got drafted to be the interim department head in forestry. And that turned into a permanent position. So I ended up being the forestry department head for about 10 years. So I spent the first 3 years kind of ramping up my research. The next 3 or 4 years kind of ramping down my research and becoming a full-time administrator for the forestry department.
Well, Ed, is there a story about how you got to Oklahoma State? Did the university contact you?
Yes, they had a position, and I had actually done a little bit of teaching. In my work with Weyerhaeuser Company, we developed a lot of cooperative research projects. So some of my cooperative research was actually with Oklahoma State, because some of my water quality work was in southeast Oklahoma.
Right.
So that was how the connection with Oklahoma State was initiated, even before the position came open here. So it was sort of a natural progression of things. Really worked out extremely well. And then the position as Associate Dean for Academic Programs came open. Paul Hummer, who had been the Associate Dean for 17 years, actually. He was getting ready to retire, so they opened the position. And I really enjoyed teaching. I really enjoyed working with the students over the years that I was a faculty member. And I continued to teach as a department head. So teaching and inspiring and mentoring students just really excited me. So I applied to become the Associate Dean. And lo and behold, surprised me as much maybe as everyone else got the position.
Who's Dean then, Ed? Help me.
Dr. Browning.
Browning.
Charles Browning was Dean at that time. One little interesting anecdote was when we first moved to Stillwater, when Nancy and I first moved to Stillwater, we moved into the home of Randall Jones. Randall had been Associate Dean for Academic Programs for the College of Agriculture. So I moved in. I was a new, assistant associate professor, kind of right on the borderline there. And of course, we had no clue that in time I would become the Associate Dean for Academic Programs for the College of Agriculture. So our first home here was Randall Jones's house. He and his wife moved out. We moved in. And then some years later, I became Associate Dean for Academic Programs.
A great gentleman, really a legend running this college.
Yeah, Randall Jones, extremely well thought of, just a real gentleman. And even today, we enjoy scholarship support from his son through an endowment that he and his wife set up for the college.
Ed, what were your first impressions of Oklahoma State? The department, the college? Well,
of course, my first impression really was built around the forestry department and then working with Tom Hahn. And so I was pretty impressed. I grew up on the Great Plains. So for a forester to return to the Great Plains was not too odd. Most foresters who graduate, I would say, from Oklahoma State or from Iowa State, or any of the forestry schools that are out on the plains, most of those kids want to go to work out in the deep woods somewhere. And I certainly had that dream as an undergraduate. But, times change and opportunities present themselves. So it was a good opportunity to come back here, to maintain the research with Weyerhaeuser, to have a faculty position. So I was just very, very happy to get this position at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was established some years after Iowa State. And the construct of the entire university was very much along the lines of the construct of Iowa State University. Even the forestry department here at Oklahoma State had programs that were quite similar. People here at Oklahoma State, when they established the forestry department, brought a lot of information and history from Iowa State's forestry program and implemented those things here because Iowa had a good forestry program. So the department was similar, the curriculum was similar, the students conservative, hardworking, very practical kids, just like back in Iowa. And so it was a fit.
You've described several capacities you served in through the years. How did you become involved in OSU's Scholar and Recognition Program, Development Recognition Program?
Well, really, I think as a department head in forestry, of course, we always work very hard to develop scholarships and to recognize students who are outstanding. But that was really in a limited context. I mean, I was really thinking within my discipline and students within that forestry arena. And when I became associate dean, really needed to expand that thinking and to really represent the college as much as possible. I think whenever you get promoted internally, you don't want to get a divorce necessarily from your discipline, but it's pretty important to pick up the banner of the organization you're working for, that bigger picture. And of course, here at Oklahoma State, we have wonderful donors, wonderful alumni. So we've always had an excellent scholarship program, that is the financial support for students. We've always had good programs for recognition of students in the college who have excelled. You know, the top student in Ag Econ, or the top students in animal science, or the top students in agricultural education. So we've always had that recognition. But I would say at the university level, really the whole idea and concept of scholar development, that is recognizing the top students, it wasn't initiated. It was certainly initiated before I became associate dean, but it was still somewhat of a fledgling program, I would say, at the university level. So it was developing, and it had gotten some traction, and it was moving ahead. And then I became associate dean, and it presented some very nice opportunities for the college in recognizing the outstanding students that we had to really buy into that.
Well, did you have, kind of picking up your comment, Ed, a little bit about fledgling and kind of, moving into maturity, that program. What were some of your thoughts on the program early on, and were some concerns you had a little bit about the program early on?
Okay, well, I don't know that I would say that I had any concerns. I think it was more of a learning process. Most faculty and department heads are not necessarily aware of some of the national level scholarships and scholars recognition programs that are available. And then I would say among the faculty that there might be some concerns because faculty may feel like one student or two or three students receiving such attention and awards, they may feel that that detracts from the larger group of students that we serve. So that would be a concern. So there's the whole issue of just learning about these programs, learning about how they would benefit students, and thinking a little bit about how such programs could benefit the college and our various academic departments, I think gave me cause for thought and not necessarily concern, but a little bit of caution. But of course, I think recognition at the university level of how important these programs are caught on pretty fast. And so it wasn't too difficult for this college to kind of buy in. we had always had through the Alumni Association recognition of like top 10 seniors. We've for a long time had recognition programs for outstanding freshmen. So I think moving from outstanding students at the university level to outstanding students at the national level was a logical and a real positive progression of thinking, kind of a broadening of our thinking, if you will.
And can you describe a little bit of your participation, how you participated in the program, initially maybe, and how it's evolved, but your participation?
Right. Well, I think really initially, the Office of Scholar Development, Bob Grallman's outfit, recognized some outstanding students in our college. That probably happened before I recognized Bob Grallman's office and the role that they could play. So it was a little bit of a two-way street. I had been participated in recognition of outstanding seniors and things like that. Outstanding freshmen. Well, Bob Grallman and his office started to work with some of these outstanding freshmen because they were trying to develop these students early on to see if they couldn't elevate themselves to this national level recognition. So in working with freshmen and then Bob's having identified a couple of outstanding students in our college, it seemed like, well, if I'm going to be the associate dean and have an influence on what's happening around here, I better get on board. So I can't say that I was necessarily the big leader here, but I didn't take me very long to recognize, I think, how valuable this could be for our students and for the college as well as for OSU.
Ed, do you have, I know Bob has described to me earlier some of the things that they asked the faculty to do in terms of helping with mock interviews, preparation. Are there some things you do specifically? Have you participated in those ways? Yes,
we've done quite a bit of that. I think, perhaps those are the formal things that we do. I really think maybe the real story at the college level is the early identification of students who have the potential. That, that's an informal process. It's not a formal process. We have a big advantage in this college because we advise all our students with faculty. Faculty members are engaged from the time a student walks in our door as a freshman. So we have a big advantage in terms of taking a look at each student as they sit down and talk to us and talk about their dreams and aspirations. Taking a look at their grades every semester to see how they're performing academically. And so I think that the most important component that our college adds to this overall process is the early identification and stimulating the students to realize their potential. Then we work with Bob Grallman's office. So to me, yes, I have involved in mock interviews, and I have helped students write their policy statements or their statements of purpose or their goals and aspirations. And have really enjoyed that process as you watch the students develop. But I think if we do anything really well in this college, it's that early identification process. That's the key.
And picking up your comments about faculty helping identify and work with students, I assume that you've been able to engage several of the faculty members in the process. Could you, in addition to yourself, could you identify some of the individuals here in the college that help identify and work with scholars?
Yeah, really, if we kind of go back, when I took this job, Wes Holly was still our assistant dean. Wes worked under Paul Hummer. And Wes was a real Pied Piper for students. He loved students and they loved him. He taught our introductory course, our Introduction to Agriculture course here in our college. So really Wes was one of the first ones who began to identify these students as they go through the orientation course. Then we would kind of notify the faculty in the various departments and say, help us to see who are the outstanding students in Ag Econ, who are the outstanding students in animal science, or who are the outstanding students in biochemistry. let's kind of get their names. Let's talk to them. Bob Grallman's office then provides some very nice early meetings with freshmen and with sophomores. Meetings where we simply discuss the opportunities that are available through scholar development to see whether the sparkle kind of catch fire with some of these students. So I would have to credit Wes, really, to tell you the truth. Wes and I initiated our freshman in transition program, and you might have heard about our living learning community. The freshmen in transition, we really aren't targeting what I would call the high rollers, but students who want to get in that program are generally students who are motivated. So through the freshman in transition program, there was another way that we connected with students who had high potential. And then I would have to say that the history of our students with 4-H and FFA has had a large influence on our ability to identify students, and students, I don't know if I call it ability or students recognizing their potential. So a lot of our early success stories in scholar development were surrounded by were with students who had a history in 4-H and FFA.
They'd sort of self-identified themselves previously too,
and they had high aspirations. Mm-hmm. I think they came from small towns like Slap Out and towns like that, but they recognized their potential. They didn't. Our students came to us. Certainly, a large group of them came to us, knowing that there was not a relationship between the size of your town and your IQ. That's pretty important.
And why is and how is it so important to get involvement of faculty in the scholar identification and development process?
Well, I think students all around the world, they like to be cared for. They like to know that someone is kind of paying attention to them and cares for them. And I think it takes, even if a student comes in here with good leadership history, like through 4-H or FFA, they still need to be supported. They still need to be inspired to do special things. And in particular, I think with national scholarships like the Udall or the Truman or the Marshall, it takes some time for these students to develop. The other thing that faculty can do, there's really two areas I think that are probably key for faculty, in addition to just the mentoring, identification and bringing the students in and pumping them up, right? You have the potential. You can do great things. You've got, you should have the highest aspirations because you can do great things. So that's number one. But the other two things probably are getting some of these students to recognize, after they recognize their potential, to really broaden their education. Many of our programs in agriculture are fairly narrow. And for a student to excel in some of these national scholarship programs, they have to do something over and above kind of the standard cookie cutter degree program. So that would be the second thing, would be faculty, along with Bob Grallman's office, inspiring these students to do things in terms of academics or extracurricular activities that they would not have done otherwise.
Good.
And then probably the third thing has been a lot of our faculty get engaged with our undergraduate students in research projects. Sometimes these start like, a student comes into your office and says, I need a part-time job. I need to earn a little money. I'd like to work 5 or 10 hours a week. And boy, if I had a job here in your department where I could go to class, work a little, and go to class, work a little, that'd be great. So you take an outstanding student, maybe they need a little bit of extra financial support. Maybe they start working in your lab, or maybe they start working on some of your data if you're an ag econ. They get a little interested in research. Pretty soon, what do you know, they really bloom. So I would say that a lot of our faculty get our students engaged in research early on, because the scholar development program has really developed into, has relied on our freshman research scholars program and our WENTS research scholars program here at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, do you mind me interrupting? I was going to ask you, how important is the help that Winston's refocused a lot of its giving, the way they've done it to more instead of student jobs, student research? Has that been beneficial? Has that been helpful?
Oh, absolutely. So those, and I would think with respect to freshman research, a lot of the students, let's put it in a real positive way. The students in our college have an easier time locating a faculty person who will mentor them in an undergraduate research project because they start right out day one with a faculty member as an advisor. And that faculty member will lead them to another faculty member who might be willing to mentor them in an undergraduate research project, or find them a job which leads into a research project of some kind. So I think our students have had a little bit of an advantage with that early relationship with a faculty member that pumps them up, gets them broadening their education, and then really getting them engaged in some undergraduate research, which seems to be a kind of a key component in this whole scholar development program.
In that final phase, and I think you've outlined well the reasons for and steps and the process for engaging a student, but in that final process where you're really grooming them to prepare them for a specific, Gates, Rhodes, Truman, scholarship, how does faculty engage at that point? What steps can you do to help in that area?
Oh, now you're talking about really those final steps of preparing a paper or conducting research and presenting the results. Or perhaps more importantly, it's helping the students develop a sense of purpose and being able to write and to express that sense of purpose. Establishing or creating a philosophy, if you will. I think we've found that many of our scholars are a little more advanced in terms of developing a personal philosophy of life or direction or purpose. And I think the faculty play a big role in letting students bounce ideas back and forth so they can develop that. We have a big debate over whether faculty can really stimulate or speed up the process of maturing. I mean, these are things that happen to us through time, but for some of us, they didn't happen until we were 30 years old. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to get students who are 20 years old and 21 years old to examine their lives and to think about their purpose and their direction and establish a philosophy. How much can a faculty member stimulate a student to mature more quickly, if you will, so that they can do that and impress a committee at the national level that they truly are outstanding students and scholars.
And did you and some of the other faculty members actually help with some of the mock interviews that you do?
Absolutely.
As well?
Yeah, we help with the mock interviews. We help a lot with the writing, and the students students are pretty much in shock when they submit the first draft of a policy statement or a philosophy statement, and it comes back all red, and then they submit it again, and it goes back all red, and they submit it again. Because, about the sixth or seventh time, and I think they're thinking, "Oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into?" But I would have to say at that point, I've gotten involved in the writing, for example, on a couple of rounds. But I have to give Bob Grallman and his office and the people that he's brought together, say out of the English department, and those on the liberal side of campus, that can really take that a step further. I'm not a great writer. I do okay, but it really takes some people with expertise in the whole area of writing to help them. And Bob has done a great job of bringing some of those people together to help these students.
And you mentioned earlier about students needing to broaden themselves just beyond their curriculum, their major area. Has that been a sort of a shift for this college for those kinds of students to encourage them to step out and take some courses in social sciences and in English and other areas?
I think our students are pretty practical minded. And they're looking for efficiency. Efficiency says, I take the courses I need to take, I get out of here, and I get a job, right?
Absolutely.
So you sit down with a student and you say, maybe you ought to take an extra course in literature, or maybe you ought to take an extra course in philosophy, or have you thought about Bob Grauman's Windows on the World course? Have you done an international program? Have you gone overseas and done some international work at all? Gosh, that's going to take me an extra semester or two if I do that. Well, of course, I'm 64. An extra semester or two, big deal. But when you're 20 and 21 years old, you're in a hurry. You want to get finished. So I think to some extent we have a little bit of a struggle to get students to slow down a little bit and to broaden themselves. So I don't think it's so much that our students are unwilling, but they are looking for, and their parents are looking for a certain amount of efficiency here. Yeah. Another semester, another tuition bill, and, et cetera, et cetera. But you think about the long-term impacts, the long-term rewards, they're phenomenal. I would have to say as well that, and I know that Bob Grauman would probably would say the same thing, and that is that, of course, for all the students who apply and do the work, only a few of them are successful at the top level. So you really, another part of the developmental process is I think willingness to invest yourself and do all this hard work, knowing darn well you might fail.
And I want to ask you a question in just a minute. I want to hold it a second, but I want to brag on you first of all, okay? When you're at college, and I can say this for you, the College of Agriculture, Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources has really had a disproportionate number of winners of national scholars competition.
We've been very lucky.
And could you share some statistics? I'm trying to recall how many in some of the areas, and perhaps a little bit about some of the awards that the students have won out of the college.
Okay. Well, let me. I can't give you the total figure. I wish I could, but let me talk about a couple of specific examples. We had a wonderful run, of course, of Truman Scholars, which really resulted in OSU, not in total, but it certainly was an important aspect of OSU becoming a Truman Scholar institution. Mm-hmm. And that started with Shannon Farrell. Came up through the 4-H system, outstanding student, bright young man, Ag-Econ major, and interested in pre-law. And Shannon was a mature thinker, excellent vocabulary, a broad thinker, well-educated more broadly than just in his discipline. Good leadership skills, good service attitude. And he became one of our first Trumans. Now, he may not have been the first Truman out of this college, but he was one of the first of a run. Mm-hmm. Then Chris Stevens, who was right in there with Shannon, became a Truman Scholar. Shannon came up through the FFA organization. Parents were both ag teachers. And Chris then applied for and became a Truman Scholar, went through this whole process of development, became a Truman Scholar, later became a Marshall Scholar. And Chris, of course, went on and was head of his class at Yale in law school after doing work at Cambridge, and came back and went to law school at Yale and was top of his class.
Shannon.
Chris.
Okay.
Shannon went on to law school down at OCU. Then we had Kent Gardner, and anybody, you could do a whole history on the Gardner family and their the way all those kids went through the College of Agriculture. But Kent Gardner, then similar path, different personality than certainly than Chris and Shannon, but same process, identified by faculty, broadened his thinking, broadened his portfolio, and applied for and was successful in the Truman Scholarship. And then we had a little interesting story, Julie Arnst. Julie actually was one of our first environmental science students. And just a little anecdote about Julie. Her interest area was in is agriculture and natural resources policy. And there's 2 or 3 faculty in Ag Econ who are interested in that area. That's really their area of specialization. And I recall that when Julie first came to us, the Ag Econ faculty commiserated and argued a little bit about really whether they ought to be using some of their Ag Econ scholarship money to support an environmental science student, even though she was interested in environmental and ag policy. Well, they finally decided, she's an excellent student, and she's well qualified. We're advising her in our department, even though she's not strictly an Ag Econ student. And so they supported Julie and really embraced her. And then Julie applied for and was successful and became a Truman Scholar. And, then the faces lit up, thank goodness the Ag Econ department decided to make that investment in Julie and really embrace her as one of their students. And of course, she chose an Ag Econ faculty member as her mentor for the Truman. So we had those 4. We had Shannon Farrell and Chris Stevens and Kent Gardner and Julie Arnst, 4 Truman Scholars, just bing, bing, bing. And that great success story. We have sort of a similar story right now with our Udall Scholars, the Morris K. Udall group. And had 2 students who were just outstanding. One was Sarah Jane Smallwood and the other one, Courtney Timmons. And of course, Courtney Timmons has become sort of famous on our campus. Sarah Jane and Courtney applied for the Udall Scholarship in the same year, mentored by different faculty. Sarah Jane was an Ag Communications major. Courtney, a Biosystems Ag Engineering major. So Courtney really gets to be claimed by 2 colleges, College of Engineering and College of Agriculture, which is a good thing. That's a great thing. That's a great program that's supported by both the colleges, and both colleges can take a lot of credit for helping to nurture Courtney along. So here's these 2 young women. They both apply for the Udall, and lo and behold, they both win the Morris K. Udall Scholarship 2 out of Oklahoma State University in the same year. Those 2 young women identified another student, Savannah Smith, an environmental science student. So we got an AgCom student and a Biosystems Ag Engineering student, identified another student, Savannah Smith, and said, Savannah, you've got all the qualities of someone who could apply for and win one of these Udall scholarships. So they got Savannah all pumped up and prepped, and Savannah had she had the horsepower, she had the engine to do it. And so Savannah applied for the next year a Udall scholarship and won the Udall. Sarah Jane and Courtney and Savannah identified another student the next year, Jesse Lay, a Biosystems Ag Engineering student. They got Jesse involved in some of the environmental activities here on campus, recycling and some things like that, that they had sort of used as an entree to the Udall scholarship, and got Jesse pumped up, and Jesse then applied for, and this year won a Morris K. Udall scholarship. So we've got a poster here floating around the college someplace of these 4 young women, all of whom became Udall scholars, and who mentored one another. And that's probably one of the things that I didn't mention in terms of the overall scholar development in this college that probably is a strength, and that is that so many of our students support one another
and identify one another and mentor one another, and really celebrate. I think Courtney and Sarah Jane got just as much joy out of seeing Savannah get the Udall as they did when they got it themselves. And so that's pretty special. Well, Ed, you kind of lead in maybe to another follow-up question on that is, in what ways has the program enriched the lives of the students, while they're doing it, but since, and when I say that, scholarship winners and maybe non-scholarship winners have been in the program.
Yeah, they really have. That's perhaps an interesting story too. I've got one good story about a non-winner that I'll relate to you. And there's a couple of things I think that we have to recognize. So few students are going to get this. But we tell our new freshmen when they enroll, and we reiterate this as the students go through their programs, that for every one of the students who gets one of these scholarships, it increases the value of every single degree that every student gets from this college. That is the value. It's like stock in a company. The value of the stock in a company, which is your degree that you get from this college. The value of that stock goes up every time one of these students brings that level of recognition to this college. Because these students achieve things nationally. They achieve recognition nationally that brings recognition of the quality here at Oklahoma State and in the College of Ag Sciences and Natural Resources. So even though every student doesn't get one of these, and a lot apply and a lot don't get it, still the value of every single degree given out of college is increased, in my opinion, because of these who try and because of those who succeed. So I think that's really important to recognize. And of course, the successes of the stories who've attained this level in terms of either graduate education or the things they do in their lives are pretty outstanding. Now, in terms of maybe we won't call them the failures, but those who really don't quite get there. And I think, again, I'd have to refer back to Bob Grallman, and Bob Grallman may use this individual as one of the examples of one who didn't make it. But that would be the example of Bart Fisher, who was a graduate of our college. And Bart was an applicant for the Truman, and he was an applicant for the Marshall, and he was an applicant for the Gates, and just didn't quite make it each time. Just, in our opinion, by a hair, but he just didn't quite make it. Gosh, to go back to a student and say, the process was valuable. Think of the growth you had through this process. Think of how much this is going to benefit you in the future. Gosh, when you just didn't get it. I don't know how much, a whole lot of that kind of salve doesn't go very far, because, you're hurting when you put that much time into one of these applications and you don't get there. But I would say Bart is an example of a student who tried and tried, and it's just there's a certain amount of luck involved in getting the right committee at the right time with the right message. But Bart would be an example of a student who really tried and tried and didn't quite make it, but was an outstanding student. And I think his overall development was fantastic. We, in fact, did locate some scholarship money for Bart to go to Cambridge following his undergraduate work. And Bart right now is actually worked for GAO in Washington, D.C. for a number of years, and he's now down at Texas A&M working on a PhD. And I know Bart is looking at an academic career on down the line sometime. And then Shannon Farrell, who was obviously one of our first Truman winners, is now a faculty member specializing in ag and natural resources law, right here in our own Department of Ag Econ. So it is great to have Shannon around to help mentor these students. So you talk about someone who's willing to identify and really push some of these freshmen along. You got a guy like Shannon Farrell around. Boy, what an opportunity for our students to have Shannon here to mentor them.
Oh yeah, and Ed, picking up on your comments a little bit about, in addition to the scholarship opportunities, but as you said, just a small number of a much larger group that are going to get those kinds of awards. Well, what benefits do students receive that participate in the program that don't ever, like Bart or others, that don't quite make it? What benefits do you think they get out of it?
Well, I think, and I'm a prime example of this, we talked about it a little bit earlier, all of us, sooner or later, hopefully most of us, sooner or later, will develop a philosophy of life or an understanding of the importance of service, or a sense of direction to our lives. Some of us kind of stumble on it by mistake. But it happens. It happens. Hopefully before we're 30 or 40 years old. Those students who go through the process of applying for one of these scholarships, they are forced, if you will, willingly, but they're forced to write and to think about their philosophy, to write and to think about service to others, to write and to think about the impact that they might have on society on down the line. That has to have a positive impact on these students. And I think so this combination of the 4-H and the FFA and the things that our college does, the relationships with faculty that develop, the lifetime relationships with faculty that develop through the mentoring process, and then the process of a student really sitting down and examining their lives, examining how they're going to take their academic work and apply it to something meaningful. Win or lose, you've got that in your hip pocket.
It's really win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Ed, a follow-up question that might be, what do you feel personally from your experience, what should be the goals of the Scholar Development Recognition Program within the college, university-wide? What should be the goals of it?
Well, of course, I think one of the goals, of course, is to help students understand their potential. And I think every student needs that, particularly students from here in Oklahoma need to really understand that there really are very few limits. We self-limit. We self-limit ourselves. And so that's really, I think, one of the goals is for all of our students. Is to, I always tell the students, have you ever tried to fill up a bottle when the lid's on it? It's really hard to get that water in that bottle when the lid's on. And our real job, I think, through academic programs is to kind of get the lids off so that we can fill them up. And I think that these kinds of programs help take the lid off, if you will. You got to open yourself up in order to fill your brain up, or fill your heart up, or fill your soul up with these kinds of ideas. And so we're trying to get those caps off the bottles, and these students influence one another. We talk about the mentoring that goes on, students helping students, which is sort of our little, that's kind of our little jingle this year, is students helping students. These students network and they talk to one another. And so we have freshmen who come in and say, that guy Bart Fisher who came from Frederick, Oklahoma, I come from that area. I come from down in Frederick, and we know the Fisher family. I'd sure like to do some of the things that Bart Fisher did. Or, someone who comes from out western Oklahoma and says, that Fisher family, the Gardner family, all those kids that went through OSU, I'd really like to do something at the caliber that Kent Gardner did. So I think it stimulates a lot larger group. If our goal was just to get these few scholars through this program so that Oklahoma State could be recognized, I think we would have already been missing the boat. Our goal is to improve the value of the degrees of everybody who graduates here. Our job is to get the lids off the bottles and to have these students help stimulate one another, to develop lifetime relationships between faculty and students, mentoring relationships between faculty and students, to help these students move on and succeed. Those are the bigger, broader goals, I think, that the Scholar Development Program really helps along.
And I assume there's some synergies with your other academic programs in the college. And can you describe how the Scholars Recognition Program is meshed with other academic and recognition programs in the college?
Well, yeah, I think as we think about the programs that traditionally we've had in the college, the recognition of outstanding seniors in particular, the departments take great pride in that. And so the whole idea of scholar development It does get a little competitive. I mean, to say that the Ag Econ department is not exceedingly proud of the number of Truman Scholars they've had, oh my goodness. So I think this has become, for a couple of our departments, just become integral to what they do. The scholar development is not the only thing going. They want to recognize all seniors who, actually all students at all levels who excel in so many different ways. But the scholars program has just become integral to that. It's just one component, and as it should be. It's not the only game, in town for our students.
You mentioned earlier that perhaps early on some faculty members were a little bit concerned about just a small handful of people getting these national recognition as opposed to a larger pool of students who need to be recognized and are being recognized. Is that still there a little bit? Oh,
I think it always is. I think, that's why I talk to freshmen about the importance of celebrating those students, but realizing that we all are helped when one of those students achieves that. But that isn't necessarily the goal for every one of our students. Some of our students, I had at the beginning of our interview today, I talked a little bit about my background. I went to Iowa State University. By the time I got my PhD, I had a wife and 3 children, got married as an undergraduate, had to work a lot of hours, was pretty much a shy and introverted type of a student. This type of thing was the furthest thing from my mind. But I wouldn't say that I was unsuccessful. There's lots of ways to make an impact. You don't have to become a great scholar or be a Truman Scholar to make a great impact. But it is inspiring, I think. I think for this college, it is inspiring for all students to see that that's one of the possibilities. But there are so many other ways the students can contribute in terms of helping each other, leadership, service to the community, helping their families, just the overall package. So we do want to recognize that there are students who have other responsibilities, students who have other goals and aspirations. There's many ways to achieve the goals you want to achieve. This is one of them, but it's an important one.
Speaking of national recognition, how important to the scholar development program was Blaine Gredeman's being recognized as first Rhodes Scholar in your mind?
Well, that's pretty spectacular. I don't want to go. I guess Bob would be better one to talk about the Rhodes in particular. At some level, there's a little bit of politics involved in all of these things. And that may be an area, but for him to have gotten that award is pretty special. Kyle Ensley is another student who's achieved some really outstanding recognition here at Oklahoma State University. My background's in forestry. I worked for a Weyerhaeuser company for a number of years. Kyle's dad worked for a Weyerhaeuser company down in southeast Oklahoma. He's a mill worker for a Weyerhaeuser company in southeast Oklahoma. Didn't seem to affect his IQ one bit, did it? There's just great things that these students can do. They just amaze you every day. One of the things that's really fun to watch, and that is that regardless of their college, regardless of their hometown, whether they came out of Tulsa or whether they came out of Slap Out or Wright City, Oklahoma, or wherever they came from, these students network in an incredible way. So one of the fun things is to go to one of these recognition deals here on campus and realize that, of course, you walk in the room first of all, and nobody recognizes you. You're just the associate dean of the college. But these students walk in the room, and everybody knows Courtney Tillmans. Everybody knows Gredeman. Everybody knows Kyle Ensley. That's pretty special. Yeah. That's pretty special across all the colleges and across all the faculty and administrators. They know these students and celebrate them. And then, of course, the other fun thing is that most of these students, almost down to the very last one, they understand their capabilities. They understand what they can do, and they appreciate what they've achieved. But almost to an individual, these people really live within. They live within themselves. Their egos are not out of control. These are people who. Courtney Timmons probably the best example. She's just another student in so many respects. She's pretty impressive, though. You stand her up in front of a big crowd to introduce Boone Pickens, and she just does it as smooth as glass. So relaxed. But one-on-one, she's just a regular student. Her ego is. She has a sense of humility, and that's pretty special to see. So it's fun to see these students interact with each other. I think that's another really special aspect of this. That networking that they have one with the other, regardless of what direction that they go, is pretty special. I know that'll last them a lifetime. I'll make a comment before you ask another question. I think another aspect that the students would not at first think about, and maybe not even the faculty, but certainly in the College of Agriculture, we hold on pretty tightly to this land grant philosophy, this land grant mission, if you will, which is really designed. One aspect of that is to bring higher education to everyday working class people. And these students that we're recognizing, they're not graduates of prep schools. Most of them coming out of Common Ed in some of the bigger cities, maybe many of the small towns here in Oklahoma. These aren't kids who were groomed from the time they were 7 or 8 years old to be outstanding scholars. And I think the recognition that these students bring to themselves and to our institution is sort of a vindication of the whole land grant philosophy of bringing these opportunities to everyday working class people, not the people who were born with a silver spoon in their mouth necessarily.
It'd be interesting. I had the opportunity to interview last week, I think I mentioned to you earlier, off camera, with Lewis Blair, who'd been executive director of the Truman Scholarship Program for many years. And he alluded to that too. And he used an example of Oklahoma State University, and before that, K-State, the schools, land grant universities, students had done exceptionally well in the recognition programs, particularly with the Truman Scholar Recognition Program. And so I think that's sort of vindication of what you're saying as well.
Yeah, it's just it's an important aspect, and I don't know that students would embrace that as much because they're not quite as keenly aware of really what they've heard land grant because we talk about it, and they understand a little bit about teaching, research, and extension and how they fit together, but they perhaps haven't gone back and read the Morrill Act and understand what President Lincoln really had in mind when he talked about bringing higher ed really to the masses, to the common folks.
Well, in your opinion, how has the scholar recognition program evolved over the years? You were a pretty early adapter early on when you become associate dean, which had been about what year, Ed? About?
Oh gosh, I started this job in '99, and so we've been around here for a little while.
Last 10 plus years. How have you seen it change and evolve since you got involved with it to now?
Well, I think we're more sophisticated. I think the recognition of how all the pieces fit together is just much better. And probably in the early days, we kind of I wouldn't say we stumbled along, but we weren't too sophisticated in how we found students who had this potential and then how we developed them. And I think we're just much more methodical about that now. That is, we've gotten ourselves we've got ourselves organized to find students and to make these opportunities available to them. Of course, things like putting the freshman research scholars together and the WENS program together and seeing how those components fit in, and seeing how faculty advisement and early mentoring, how that all fits in together with the scholar development. And then, of course, Bob Grallman has done such a wonderful job of making sure, I think, always that it's a university-wide program, that it's not focused on one college or another. So the evolution really has to do with becoming a little more sophisticated in how we approach scholar development, I think. One thing, Bob could really address much better how things have evolved nationally, and so he's tried to adjust, along with Lewis Blair's help. He's tried to adjust to the evolution of programs nationally, and how then we might adapt and prepare ourselves as an institution and as colleges to that. And that's bigger than me. That's a different viewpoint than I have. My viewpoint is still kind of focused here in the college with our students. But Bob has clearly indicated that the competition nationally has gotten pretty keen. Lots of more schools are interested in developing their students and having their students be recognized. They understand how important that is to their institutions. So the competition nationally is tough.
And you partially answered this, but again, what do you think of the strengths of our program here at Oklahoma State University from your perspective, of our scholar recognition development program?
Well, I think there's so many strengths, and they really are the attributes of the program. I think that the strengths are the early identification. That's certainly a strength of the program. I think celebrating Bob Grallman. Of course, I keep mentioning Bob's name because I really see him kind of as the author and the vision for the program. But I think that our college embraces this as well, and that is the recognition not of the higher administration and their role in this, or the recognition of Bob's office and his role in this. The real focus, if you take a look at our Hall of Fame over in the Student Union, the Halligan Hall of Fame over there, what level of recognition is given over there? It's the student and the faculty mentor. That's whose pictures are up on the board. It's not the dean's picture. And I think at the university we have a tendency to defer. Here's the dean and an outstanding scholar, or here's the president and an outstanding scholar. Well, guess what? They showed up when the award was given. It was the faculty member who really helped these students. It was the faculty member who helped the student develop the philosophy and to write the paper and to give them the mock interviews and things like that. So I think I have to give our Scholar Development Office a lot of credit for keeping the focus on the relationship between the student and celebrating the student-faculty relationship. And then another key, I think, to the success is not getting so hung up on the winners, but letting those who didn't achieve understand how important it is. Probably as much blood, sweat, and tears goes into coming and helping support those students who didn't make it, so that they don't feel like the rug's been pulled out or that the bottom dropped out from under them. Here they are, some of the best students you've got, and they have this feeling of failure for not having achieved the scholarship. So how do you come in and say, you know what, this was valuable. This is going to pay huge dividends to you in the future. And isn't it interesting? I think every day I discover things that happened, investments that people made in my life, investments that people made in me. I had to be 60 years old before I realized the value of an investment that was made in me when I was 18. And so these students, those things are going to come in time. They're going to understand the value of that investment, even if they didn't make the top scholarship.
And picking up and maybe rephrasing what you're saying, two things that you keep alluding to there's interest in. You might want to comment further or not, but is the investment that faculty have made in this program and understanding someone who might be listening to this tape. Faculty aren't getting an extra penny for this. I mean, the time, the resources they're putting into it, the passion they're putting into it, the hours they're putting into it.
Nope, not a dime. They do get a little bit of a reward. And so, but I think for faculty, the rewards are immediate. A small immediate award is worth a whole lot more than a big long-term reward, perhaps, way out in the future someplace. The success of the students and the pleasure of the students is an awfully big reward.
But that's been, in your mind, part of the genius and part of the strengths of this program was that faculty engagement.
So they didn't pay you an extra $1,000 or $5,000 or $20,000 to have your picture up next to a student over in the Halligan Scholars Hall over there. But wow, every parent and future student and other faculty walk through there and they look at those pictures on the wall and say, wow, what a great investment those faculty made in those students. The value isn't it great that those students recognize the value of the contributions those faculty made in their lives? Isn't that just fantastic? So there wasn't a lot of money. Now if a student though gets let's say the student gets a Wentz undergraduate research scholarship as a part of this whole process, just as an example. And a number of our top scholars have had Wentz projects. Not all, but a number of them have. Then there's a little money to help support the research. Most of the money goes in the pocket of the student as a scholarship, but a little money goes to help support the research. Precious little, but a little, a little. And so that's a little bit of a reward. We have a wonderful recognition program for the Wentz scholars and their mentors. And, the students and the faculty get up and be recognized. There's a reward. I think it's the kind of the non-monetary rewards have certainly helped in this whole process, because the monetary rewards are few and far between. One of the things that a student can do as an undergraduate to really enhance their opportunity, both for these scholarships and to enhance their opportunities maybe for postgraduate studies, is to get a research paper before they graduate as an undergraduate. So the Freshman Research Scholars Program, the Wentz program, the Scholar Development Program, sometimes these things lead to an undergraduate research paper before the student graduates with their bachelor's degree. And if it's co-authored with their major professor, their mentor, why, there's a pretty nice feather in the cap. And that eventually then goes on that annual appraisal for that faculty member. The fact that they mentored a Wentz scholar and that there was a research paper perhaps that was published in partnership with that student. So those do lead to some real, what I would call monetary rewards, but most of it is just the pure joy of seeing the students succeed, I think.
The other strength that I think I've heard you allude to, Ed, in our conversation is the investment, and I like you used that word many times. I think it's very appropriate, the investment that the college, the university, the faculty members have made in the lives of these students, not just about winning the scholarships, but she said about their heart and their soul and expanding their thinking about themselves and their potential.
Right.
And you're talking about trying to get that lid off the bottle and pouring water into the bottle.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that perhaps is maybe, I hear you saying that that's a real strength of the program here at Oklahoma State University.
Yeah, I think it is. And like I say, I think then those students go out and many of them appreciate it at the time they graduate, but they'll appreciate even more when they're 50, 40, 30, 40, 50 years old. I think they'll really appreciate it. Our college has been blessed with people who have provided endowments for scholarships.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about scholars, but I'm talking about monetary scholarships for undergraduates. Our college has been quite successful in that area. We have a large number of endowed scholarships. If you ask a faculty, if you ask a donor, a big donor, why they provided scholarship money, most of them would not cite their close relationship with the president of the university. All due respect to the president of the university, most students would not say that was the reason for their donation. And on down the line, most of them, it would come back to a faculty member in a department who invested themselves in that student so that the student would become successful. And you'll hear people who donate money say, I would never have graduated had it not been for my academic advisor, Bob Kropp, or Joe Schatzer, or Joe Williams, or whoever it might be. That's what you hear most often. Now, there are some students who develop a good relationship with the president, and that's wonderful because we've had some great presidents who love students and invested themselves in students. So please don't take my remark as a negative against the higher administration. We've got a great administration, but most of our scholar donors, our donors for big scholarships, have been primarily because of love of their home department, their major, and maybe it was a club advisor who was a faculty member, maybe been their faculty advisor, academic advisor, may have been the faculty member who advised their judging team or their organization, their professional organization as a student. Those are the relationships that last and then comes back. So I would not say, I dare say there's probably not a faculty member who's thinking to himself, I'll just really spend a lot of time with that Bart Fisher because who knows, in 25 years, maybe Bart will give us a big scholarship. I mean, most of us are going to be retired. I'm going to be long gone when some of these students finally get to the place where they might donate to a scholarship program. But you do it because you love the students. But I think the fact that we have that number of scholarships is testament to the fact that the most important relationship is with the faculty and student.
It flip side of the coin for a minute. We talk about the strengths of the program. Are there some areas of, I won't say weaknesses, there's some areas where we think we can enhance to do better, do differently going forward?
I think so, but we have a conflict that exists, and it's one that most people wouldn't think too much about, perhaps. But we have tried to compress our academic programs down to 120 hours, 120 student credit hours, semester credits. And that's because there's a lot of political pressure, if you will, to get students graduate as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Tuition is expensive. It is hard to compress the kind of breadth in a curriculum that you would like to develop in 120 credit hours. In agriculture in the last 5 to 7 years, we've had to compress from 130 hours. Most of our programs were 130 hours. We've had to compress down to 120. And theoretically, that does provide for a certain level of efficiency. Your total tuition required to pay is lower with 120 hours than it was with 130 hours. But if you're trying to develop an individual and they're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, and we've talked about, what about an extra semester of investment? What about a semester abroad? What about that ag legislative internship with the legislature that happened in the spring semester that causes you to graduate a semester or two late? I really think we need to examine our measure of success. Maybe for many of these students, 120 hours is not really the ultimate. If they really want to get a major, maybe they want to get a double major, Maybe they want to get minors. Maybe they want to broaden their general education perspective in addition to their major. Maybe they want to do overseas work. Well, all these things take time. And so I think we have a little bit of a conflict here. So I think one of our challenges for the future is convincing folks that perhaps this 4-year, 120-hour model is not necessarily the ultimate model.
And Ed, particularly, I think I hear you saying for those students, I mean, for all students, but especially for those students who we're trying to broaden them and engage them in the scholar recognition program, they need some more of these kinds of experiences, some different kinds of coursework, et cetera.
Yeah. Right. And so, you know, that's a concern that I have. I think that at the university level, increasing the interaction of undergraduates with faculty, perhaps. I think we do an excellent job of that in this college, but I think university-wide, we certainly have some areas where faculty across all the university are heavily invested in undergraduate students. So I don't mean to imply that they're not, but I think we could do a better job at the university level of getting our faculty engaged with students, particularly early on in their academic programs. The view that when students get here, they're pretty confused and really are not mature enough to understand what their major ought to be or how they might ought to develop. And we can really wait around until they're juniors to identify a major and then maybe find a faculty advisor for them, I think is not, it's not, in my opinion, the way to go. I think we always tell our students, it's okay to change your plans. It's just not okay not to have a plan. So the idea that you would come here without a plan, I think is not a good idea. I think every student ought to have a plan. And you can change your plans. I changed majors 3 times. My goodness, you know. But you got to have a plan. And in that regard, you'll see 2 types of students. We'll have some students who seem to focus really well on academics, even if their long-term goals are not well established or well focused. But we have a large number of students as well who, until they've been able to set their long-term goals or really understand what their long-term goals, they really drift academically. Right. Without a long-term goal, it's hard for them to focus and put the energy into each semester. And those students I worry about. If they don't know what they want to do out here, if they don't have a long-term plan, then the short-term stuff just doesn't work very well for them. So those are some concerns I have. And how that relates to scholar development, well, I'm not exactly sure, because most of these kids who came into scholar development, they were pretty well focused. They knew in a general way, where they were headed, and they were certainly willing to do the work in the short term, regardless of whether the long-term plans were going to change. But in terms of the broader student body and how the scholars program impacts it, I think the scholars program provides kind of a model, maybe for more how we ought to deal with all of our students.
Good point. Well, Ed, for you personally, what's given you the most satisfaction from your participation in the Scholars Recognition Program?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me what gave me the most satisfaction of being the Associate Dean for Academic Programs in the College of Agriculture. And I would have to say that the meetings with department heads once a month that we spend is probably the most stimulating time in my. Oh, excuse me, Jerry.
I was believing most.
I thought maybe I would give you put a little humor in there.
I was believing this interview right up to this point, Ed. Then it just lost your credibility.
I would say that although some of those meetings are valuable, those are not necessarily the highlight of my academic career. No, I would have to say, and I know this sounds kind of like a leading question, and maybe it's kind of a pat answer. But Bob Grallman, following our breakfast with Louis Blair this past week, and meeting with 10 or 15 scholars right in this room, freshmen and sophomores. That gave me enough energy to go the whole semester.
Mm-hmm.
That one meeting and seeing a few of those students, that provided enough gas to go the miles.
Survive your departmental meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and most academicians will joke a lot about administrative meetings and more committee meetings. But those are pretty fantastic. We had 3 or 4 students in there, maybe more, that were absolutely, they are set to go. And Jessie Lake came, our latest Udall scholar. She came to the meeting and gave a little stimulating comment or two. And of course, Shannon Farrell was there. But after the meeting was over, we couldn't kick them out the door. These 4 or 5 students really were, you could tell, they were zeroing in on this. You couldn't get them out the door. One young man, I can remember talking to his dad when he enrolled. His dad said, well, he says, I won't tell you the kid's name, but he says, he was out in the backyard and in the creek just all the time. I mean, the kid loved bugs. He just dragged snakes and lizards and bugs and everything in the house, just loved it. He just loved particular insects. And, but he's got such a great aptitude and he really wants to be a doctor. That's what he wants to do. That kid was just amazed when he found out we actually can do pre-med in the entomology program. Well, that's pretty unique. That's pretty unique. A student who, incredible ACT score, excellent student, well-focused, entomology, pre-med. He's done some great service work. Going to spend next summer, I think, several weeks in Africa working on some community health-related issues. He's interested in insect vectors of disease. My gosh, what a combo. Now, I don't know if he's going to become a Truman Scholar or a Udall Scholar or anything else, but this kid is, he's got the fire, he's got the aptitude, he's really unique. He's raring to go. We had 2 or 3 students in the room like that. That'll just take you the whole semester right there.
Obviously, it's been a great joy to you to participate and hear you describe it. Would you recommend it to other faculty members to be engaged?
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say? What would you say to a faculty member about recruiting them to participate in the scholars program?
Oh, faculty are just like students. Not every student is designed to be a scholar, and not every faculty member is designed to be necessarily a great mentor. We have faculty who contribute in so many ways. Today, there was an article in the Ocali about a new young faculty member in biochemistry who did some visiting work at a research laboratory. He went there and worked for 48 hours straight because they have to rent or they have to get a grant to work in that facility. And he's discovering some things about protein structure that are going to knock our socks off. That's a great way to contribute. I don't know that professor's time and energy would be well vested, although there may be an opportunity for him to have some undergraduate students in his laboratory. And that might be his contribution. In terms of stimulating a student to get a more liberal education, that's probably not the role for that faculty. So it takes, I think it takes this full set of faculty, and they have different roles that they can play. And I think there's important ways that each of them can contribute. But kind of the whole package is not for every faculty member. But so we need to discover for individual faculty, I think, how they can best contribute in ways that are meaningful. And that varies so much. But I think every one of those faculty then would feel extremely good if they understood how they contributed to the success of an undergraduate student like that. So different roles, different faculty, not the same role for every faculty member. But I would encourage every faculty member to figure out how their piece works.
They can engage.
That they can engage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this has been great, and just would leave you this final question. There's some additional comments you'd like to make, or something we left out that you'd like to express about the program that we perhaps didn't cover?
Gosh, I don't think so. I think your questions were pretty comprehensive, and we kind of expanded on a few and went some different directions. I think you'll be able to kind of get the common themes out of here. I mean, obviously, not to be glib, this is one of the areas that brings perhaps the most joy and excitement to my job, and I think the jobs of a lot of our faculty. Having said that, my office is also the place where the students come to get reinstated after they flunked out. And you know what? There's some value in doing that. So sometimes you go home and you think, I'm always thinking of a student that's sitting across from me, and they may have flunked out at some time, and they're trying to get back in school, and they just think they're going to do better. They're going to do more work this time. They're going to focus more this time, and you're trying to figure out whether in fact you're just taking their money to let them back in school. We're not here to rob people of their money. So when you let a student back into school, you're thinking about they're paying tuition and fees to the institution and them being successful. Mm-hmm. And there's quite a bit of joy, I think, when you see students like that walk across the stage.
Ed, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Jerry. This is a pleasure.